I think we are at a pivotal moment. What's the point in doing a computer science degree if artificial intelligence is going to make most of what that course is going to teach null and void? I'm not just saying this for effect, but I rarely see anything as a failure. And I think what's going to happen next is...
Gareth.
Hello.
Who should care about your message and why?
Who should care about my message and why? It depends on what the message is, and it depends on what the people who are listening to this want to get out of it. First question is, do we need another podcast in the world? Like seriously, do we need another one of these? We probably don't, right? But here we are. So look, I think anybody that's just interested in what's going on in the world of technology and how technology can be used to, lots of buzzwords, enable business, create efficiencies, all of those things that my IT teacher said I should never use, right? I was never allowed to use quick and efficient. IT is, to make it quick and efficient. I was never allowed to use that. But that's reality, especially at the minute with automation and stuff. So the people who should listen to this, I could naturally say C-suite people, the C-suite, because usually that's the sort of audience that podcasts like this are focused at. But really anybody that's interested in how using technology can make their job easier or, their hobbies easier, given I use a lot of technology to do that for myself.
The evolution of technology is kind of like upon us, right? We're in 2024, going into 2025. How does that evolution affect everyone?
Great question, because it's a great question because I've got two kids. My son's 16, my daughter's 14, and I am looking at their career paths and their lives, and I'm asking myself that very question. Because, without getting caught up in the hype, I think we are at a pivotal moment of how we work, how the world works. Excuse me. And the difference between now and when I was a kid and coming into this industry was that it felt almost new. In fact, that's how I got into it. It was a hobby. Anybody who worked in technology for, obviously for a profession, it was almost like it was very much a back office thing. And I'm 48, so as I was coming through, we were in the early stage. IBM 286 was like the machine that it had proliferated. The IBM ATXT. I mean that was the start of the boom. I was a little bit after the start of the boom, but it had enough traction, and so I sort of got into it by accident because it had been a hobby and because I love games and because I love technology and because I love electronics. I never once thought about going into this as a career. Never once. I wanted to be a journalist, and never ever considered it. And then went to media studies college and hated it, and dropped out and lay around the house for about a year. And much to the disappointment of my dad. And he ultimately, it was him that said, look, you must be able to do something with computers. You're never off that bloody thing. Just to paraphrase my dad. And I went to the job centre and said, look, can you do anything with computers? And they went, yes, we're going to put you on a YTS course and we're going to train you in word processing and spreadsheets and desktop publishing, because those are the things that we do with computers in jobs. And that's what I did.
So walk us through it then, from that day you walked into the job centre to where you're sat now. What does that look like?
But I went into the job centre, ended up on this course. It was a YTS course. It was a 12-month course to learn the things that I mentioned. Word processing, how to use a spreadsheet, how to do desktop publishing. And it was City and Guilds. So you got your City and Guilds level 1 in word processing, which was, you went in and sat in a room. It was all self-paced learning, but they had an instructor there who you could ask for help. And you basically went through the book and typed stuff in. Do this, click, file, save. And that's what you did. And these were on IBM 386s. And then when you did all 3 modules on word processing, then you moved on to the spreadsheet, which was Lotus 123 R2, I think, or R3, for the old people out there. And then you did database technologies, and it was Borland DBase, right? I know that doesn't mean anything to you, but Born in DBS 3 Plus was like literally a text-based database package. And so you went through the book, and it was supposed to take a year, and I had it finished in 16 weeks. So the people who ran the training centre said, do you want a job? Like, do you want to help out the other kids that come through and other adults? Because there was adults there as well. It was actually a disabled centre for people with disabilities. That's what it was. And so I said yes, because again, it didn't really feel like a job. And I did that for a year. And then as part of the course, they give you like a work placement. So I did the work placement and hated it. I ended up working for the local government superannuation committee, which is the pensions department. And I hated it. It was sitting in front of a machine doing data entry. It was just like, this is so boring. What's the point? So I thought I wanted to go then and do a degree. So armed with my City and Guilds qualifications, I went to do an HNC. And then my idea was do an HNC and then go and do a degree. Started the HNC, and again, I was learning like Turbo Pascal was the application programming language. It's just like, this doesn't mean anything to me. So I went and got a job in desktop publishing, doing design, because that was the other thing I could do.
Right, very interesting.
So using Aldus PageMaker. And ultimately, long boring story, but what happened next was, while I was working for this paper, doing publishing, doing designs for them, for flyers and for adverts in the paper, things started to break. So people needed their computers fixed, or, they had Novell NetWare 312. And again, people know what that is. I didn't know what it was at the time. It had a cool snake that went around the screen when there was a screensaver. But things started to break, and so they asked me, "Can you help out?" I can fix that. Oh, can you help out? Can you? And so that was effectively me then on the path to moving into technology. But that's what I'm saying. Like in those days, so I think in my generation, a lot of it was quite accidental. So I've got friends who, two of my closest friends. One works for one of the world's biggest technology companies. The other one's an IT director. They both stumbled into it in very, very much the same way. They ended up working in a call center doing IT support while they were doing their degrees. And then that was them on the path to so there was so it was very different. Nowadays, and this is the point, nowadays with kids nowadays, there's lots of different schools of thought on this, obviously. But I don't have a strong opinion about this, but if I was sitting making a decision now, the problem is, what's the point in doing a computer science degree if artificial intelligence is going to make most of what that course is going to teach null and void?
Yeah.
And so that's a real challenge. So how do people get into it today? Just start doing stuff is what I would say.
I was thinking how long it would take for us to have a chat before the AI discussion came up.
Yeah, well, I mean, unfortunately, you can't avoid it. And I had this sort of, I wouldn't say epiphany, but I definitely had this realization last week. I was doing something last week at home, and I was effectively pair programming with an LLM. And I thought to myself, I've said a lot in meetings and stuff recently, it's a bit cringe talking about AI. We're already there, right? So when people are talking about AI hype, and there's this noise over here, which is, really good marketing in many cases, but we're already there. We're using it every day. So when I mentioned my kids, my son is the polar opposite to me, in the sense that I'm just not a visual person, despite the fact I was able to work a computer to put some graphics on a page. But I was an outlier in those days because I knew how to work the machine. Right? It wasn't because I knew anything about design. Whereas, if I look at my son, that's his thing. He's very visual and he's very design-led, and in particular video. Video is his passion. That's what he does. That's what he's good at. I'm looking at him and saying, is anybody going to need editing in the way that it is today in 5 years? I'm not so sure.
That leads us on perfectly, actually, into the next question that I had for you. which is, where do you see technology in the next 5 to 10 years?
The path for me is relatively clear in the sense that it's going to be the proliferation of data centers, big data centers. I think in much, I remember the cloud boom, which was only 2008 really it started. I'm probably being a bit generous there. It was probably before that when but that was certainly when it started to get traction and companies started calling themselves something cloud or cloud something, right? And I think we're going to see lots of data centers, lots of compute, everything done in the cloud. I think it's going to be AI as a service. I've been reading a lot lately about, excuse me, services as software as opposed to software as a service. So, at the moment where you've got a CRM and, Salesforce, other CRMs are available, you pay a license for a seat and you use that tool then to help you automate or speed up your workflow. Where it seems that it's going is it's actually a service. So the outcome is the thing that you pay for. So I don't want you to give me a license to use a piece of software. I want you to give me, I want you to charge me by how many records you automate or, how many customer contacts you update or whatever it might be.
Why do you think there has been that switch between the two?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think obviously the technology hasn't necessarily been available. I think if you look at the history, so AI in the way AI is not new, right? I think I posted on LinkedIn about it a while ago. There's a copy of a magazine, a technology magazine from the 60s that is talking about AI. The concept of artificial intelligence isn't new. I think what's new now is that that massive compute at scale. It's only in the last 10 years we've had that because of cloud and because of fast networks and, networks being available to everybody at the home or in the workplace. That infrastructure hasn't been there. So that's why this is accelerated, because now you can do all of this compute. Because let's face it, right? An LLM is just a big calculator, right? I'm probably going to get lambasted for that, but it is. It's not biological. It's a big calculator. So I think that's why this has led to this point. The acceleration has been as a result of the infrastructure being available. And I think what's going to happen next is that the AI companies, so these companies that are training these frontier models, right? Why are they doing it? Because they want to be the next infrastructure companies, right? So you've heard Sam Altman on podcasts saying, don't try and build an LLM. What you need to do is you need to build an integration with our LLM, otherwise we'll steamroller you. Well, he's telling you the answer. They want to be an infrastructure company. It's the same with what Musk's doing. It's the same with what Anthropic are doing. It's the same. The only person that isn't doing that is Zuckerberg. And he's doing it open source because he's probably thinking if you can't beat them, join them. But also, at some point in the future, he might decide to insource it. So that's what I think.
Are there any pieces of technology that excite you right now?
Business or personal?
Both.
Yeah, so I mean, look, LLMs obviously, and that whole thing's really exciting. I think the new software IDEs are exciting. And I like all of that stuff. But I get quite excited by stuff that bridges the gap between the real world and the technology world, right? Because I think that's the hardest jump to make. So anybody can, or not anybody, it's going to be easier to develop a solution for something that's contained within the virtual world of a network, right? But the minute you cross the plane into something that's physical, it's really hard. And I know it's really hard because I've tried it and failed, right? So it's not easy to make that jump from this concept to the physical world. So I get quite excited when I see stuff like robotics. It's also a bit frightening, but just seeing the pace at which that's moving now as well. I think robotics is really interesting. I think energy tech is really interesting. I think it's going to be the whole transport thing, the whole self-driving cars thing. I personally, what do I know? But what I think is that self-driving cars is only solvable once everybody's got a self-driving car. Because I think when you've got a human in the loop, that's when the problems continue. So that stuff really excites me, where you can see a real world impact.
Your LinkedIn tag is solving problems.
Yeah.
What's your process to solve a problem and find that solution?
You can't fix what you can't see or what you don't know about, right? So the first bit for me is always understanding the problem and breaking the problem into, or the constituent parts, to try and get the solution, to even understand if there is a solution. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends what side of the fence you're on. But throughout my career, and somebody said it to me recently, you hear this in meetings all the time. People go, "Oh, stop solutionizing." Well, why? Why should it stop Why would it? We're talking about a problem. Why wouldn't it? Well, stop don't solutionize. Well, there's no such word. Solutionize, is there? Need to look that up.
Yeah, I will look it up after.
Why wouldn't I want to solutionize? We're here to talk about a problem, so why wouldn't want to fix it? Right. So I think you've got to understand the constituent parts. So what is the root cause, or what are the contributing root causes that is resulting in the problem? And then you've got to set about working backwards almost from, what does the outcome look like? What do we want this outcome to be? And then plotting a path, and then breaking the path to the solution into its constituent parts as well, because very rarely in life does anything go in a straight line, right? So Gary V always says, things take longer than you think.
Yeah,
it's absolutely true. We've got this, as humans, this ability to underestimate the time and complexity requirement to get the solution.
Yeah. Do you think also sometimes it's a case of people thinking that it's as simple as getting from A to B, when in actual fact, as you mentioned there, it's more of a zigzag route. It's, you're going up, down, left, right. It's not as simple as just going from this point to this point. There's a number of things that you have to do before that to enable you to actually get to that final solution.
Yeah, totally agree. And again, the problem with a lot of the way that the world has developed is that we plan and estimate based on what we think is going to happen, right? I mean, it's ludicrous when you take a step back and you look at it. You go, it's ludicrous. I understand why we all do it, but it's ludicrous, right? So, we've had it this week. How long is it going to? So we're getting a chimney removed, right? How long is it going to take you to remove that chimney, Mr. Builder? It's going to take me 3 days. Okay, then it snowed. Well, it was really cold. The scaffolding couldn't go up. Right? What happens now? Right? So take that, which is relatively rudimentary. Respect to all you builders out there. And then go to like a massively complex technology problem with hundreds and thousands of people involved in it, and try and do it in the same way.
So moving on to that then, what solution are you working on right now?
Business or personal?
Either. What comes to your mind straight away?
I've got loads. Maybe that means that it's because I see a problem everywhere I go. So the work related one, well, there's a couple. I could be really candid. Scaling people is really hard. Right? Scaling people is harder than I ever thought it would be, and I think it's harder when you're not in a corporate environment where there's lots of other people, right? So that is absolutely a problem. And it's a problem for a variety of reasons, probably outside the scope of this discussion, but it's hard. So getting people, to do things at scale is difficult. That's the first problem I'm trying to solve, and I think we're always going to be trying to solve that problem. I'm fascinated by the problem of digital identity. It's not new. I think it's some would say, a relatively dry topic. I don't think it's solved. I don't think it's solved at a at a government level. I don't think it's solved at an individual organisation level. I don't think it's solved on an internet level or at an internet level. So I'm quite interested in that, and I like reading about that and getting into that.
So what's missing there then for that to be solved?
The problem, the root cause problem of that is that, you know, everybody wants to have central control of the identity, and you can't have that. That's the problem. So, you know, there's arguably a bit of a paradox there that it might not ever be solvable, but it can be better than what it is today because it's terrible. You know, logins and passwords. Like this was all supposed to go away. I've got one password, right? That's a solution to a problem. But actually, it causes me as many problems because it saves multiple versions of the password. And yes, I know you could clear up the admin and stuff, but I've got 300 plus saved duplicates, right? And that's just not a good solution. Single sign-on. Has anybody cracked that yet? Don't think so. So yes. So that whole thing about digital identity interests me from a sort of a more, obviously from a work and personal basis. Haircuts, right? I hate getting a haircut. Right, and when I go to the barber, right, anybody who doesn't go to a barber that has an appointment system, which some barbers won't do because then it means that the tax man can see how many haircuts they've had or done, right? True. It's a bit like a takeaway. Why is the takeaway not accept a card? We're on to you.
Yeah.
Right. So this is haircuts. You go in to get a haircut. There's 3 people cutting hair, right? And the guy that you know can do a relatively okay job of cutting your hair. There's other people, and he might be free next, but he might not be, right? And you have to play haircut roulette, barber roulette, right? So that's really uncomfortable. But also, while you're sitting there, it's a waste of time, right? If there's a queue of people in front, and everybody knows he's the good barber, so other people might go, if they're next, they might say, no, I'm waiting for him. Right, which means you're wasting your time. So what we need a barber shop that has an adjoining coffee shop, right, with quality coffee in it. Maybe an adjoining cigar lounge.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
And some other sort of activity that blokes can just go to, take a ticket, and say, I want to be with her Barber A. Call me. I've got ticket number 1. Call me whenever Barber A's free. I'm just popping next door for a coffee and a cigar. That's a real problem, Ben. I've given you a solution there. You can
might take that away for myself.
Please do.
Yeah,
I'll come to it. I'll come and get a haircut.
So we always talk about what's worked, but what about failures? Is there anything that sticks out to you as kind of a pivotal point in your career when something has kind of failed, but you've had to move past it and it's changed the way you've looked at a certain thing?
Loads of failures. I don't know. This is probably why I end up in the positions that I end up in, because I rarely see anything as a failure. I'm not just saying this for effect, right? But I rarely see anything as a failure, because I would rather have a crack at something and it not work out, and to be able to take the learning from it and go and do something better, than to call it a failure. I'm not just saying that. It's not just words. I generally rarely feel like anything's been a failure. I can look at stuff and go, made a bad decision there, or that hasn't worked out, but failure is very much it's quite a final term, and it's quite a final feeling. That was a failure, right? And some things just outright are. But I think if you frame it that it's more about a learning experience, I think it helps. So yeah, I've had loads. I left the company I worked for 8 years, and I went to, when I was moving to Newcastle, to be with my now wife, and I made some bad career choices. I took a sales job in an organisation I wasn't a right fit for. I took a solution architecture job in a large Indian offshorer and I absolutely hated it. You know, to the point where it affected my mental health as much as my career. I jumped again and I moved into something else. So I had like, you know, 5 or 6 really, I would say I had 8 years at one company, and then I had like 5 or 6 jumps in quick succession. And I knew I couldn't jump quickly again, otherwise I was going to be in trouble. So yeah, so those things have happened obviously throughout my career. You know, I used to regret not doing the degree. It's not a failure as such, but I used to regret it. I used to think it held me back. And, you know, that was something that, you know, I used to think that, oh, I should have really done that. I could have, you know, would have been in a better position. As it turns out, that's not true. So yeah, so those are the big things. But like I could talk about failures and setbacks and everything all day, as I'm sure everybody can.
Finish up then. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who is struggling to find a solution, or like as we've just said there, has gone through multiple failures and kind of like struggling to actually get to that point where they have that change in mindset of looking as a failure as a success almost, what would that be?
Don't give up is the first one. That's the prime, and it sounds like, you know, it should be obvious. There's a lot of the discussion about this online at the minute as well. You know, don't give up versus knowing when to quit. I think both are valid. But if there's something you really want to do, if there's a problem you really want to solve, if there's something that's keeping you awake at night, or, you know, if there's something in your life that you're not happy about, then don't stop. Don't stop, because what will probably happen is the end point you arrive at is, you know, the solution might be different to what you thought when you set out on that path, but it'll still be a solution. And maybe actually what's happened over the period of time isn't that the problem has changed, maybe you've changed. And I think that's really important. You know, that's the growth. And you might get to that end point and realize that, as I say, the problem as you saw it isn't actually the problem, or wasn't the problem. Maybe it was the circumstances. So that would be my advice. Keep going, don't give up, and try and live through it, try and savor it. You know, obviously it's not applicable to every situation, but that's what I would say. Never stop.
Thanks, Gareth. Thanks for your time today.
Are we done?
We're done.
I could keep going. Good. Thank you very much.
Perfect.